All right. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to our third town hall. We're happy that you were able to join us today. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Deneen Bertel, and I'm the Readiness Coordinator for the Oil Wildlife Care Network Management Team. And I'll be kind of hosting you along today and introducing the wonderful group of speakers that we have. So I think you all received the agenda. So let me just move forward here and just tell you a little bit about how things are gonna progress today. A little bit about Zoom. So I suspect a lot of you are already familiar with Zoom, but just a few things about the webinar version that we wanted to highlight with you today. First, the audio settings. So you will not be able to mute or unmute yourselves, but if we need to, the panelists will be able to do that. You have the opportunity to chat amongst yourselves and say hello to each other and catch up a little bit. You can also chat with the panelists if you would like, so you could do that separately. So please use that, say hello. The raise hand feature, we may use that if we need it, it's there. Next would be the Q&A. So later in the session, we will open it up for your questions. So please use the Q&A for our question and answer portion. That will be towards the end of our town hall today. And if you have a burning question, just type it in there and we'll try to address as many questions as we possibly can. Any questions that we are not able to address, we'll either address them later or we'll connect with you in some way to make sure that we answer your question. And finally, if for any reason you need to leave the meeting today, just click this Leave Meeting button and you will exit the meeting. One last quick thing is we are recording today's session. So since you are here, you are authorizing that we are okay to record. And if you want to share it with anybody later on or somebody who was unable to make it today, you will have access to that recording and we will let you know when it's available. So to make sure we effectively use our time today, I'm going to hop right into our agenda. So the first speaker today is, you probably all know him very well. It's Dr. Michael Zaccardi, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about some changes within the OWCN and his new role. Mike, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Deneen, and thank you to everybody for joining us today. I'm really glad we have almost 100 people joining us, so that's perfect. Let me start my share. And everybody see that okay? Okay, so today I'm going to be talking a bit about some changes that are upcoming within the OWCN. I did want to put David Bowie's song as the theme to this, but I couldn't figure out the audio setting in time, so we're just going to go with the word. First, as some background, I know everybody knows the Oil Wildlife Care Network here and the partnership that exists between the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, OSPR, and the Karen C. Dreyer Wildlife Health Center. Those two entities are the two that really focus and help manage the Oil Wildlife Care Network on behalf of the people of California. The Wildlife Health Center I've been fortunate enough to be the director of for the past 6 years has a number of different programs and projects within it. What you may not be aware of is the Wildlife Health Center is one of 5 main centers within the One Health Institute, the One Health Institute being the next level up within the School of Veterinary Medicine. We manage the Wildlife Health Center, but also the Epicenter for Disease Dynamics, California Raptor Center, our One Health Lab, and the UCDAVIS Center of Expertise in Planetary Health. In addition to those 5 centers, we have 5 major programs and projects that are outside of centers, one of which is the PREDICT project, which has gone on 10 plus years right now to address the next pandemic, go figure. But there are a number of other programs and projects that exist within the One Health Institute as well. So the OWCN is a very important part of the center and the institute, as well as the School of Veterinary Medicine. Coming back to me real quick, this really old picture back when my hair was actually red. I've been fortunate enough to be part of the OWCN since 1996. I actually started out as a contract veterinarian for the California Department of Fish and Game at that point to do oil spill response. Went for 14 very cold months to Chicago, came screaming back to California when John and Mazette offered me an opportunity to become the OWCN coordinator and then the associate director of the OWCN. And then in 2003, I actually moved to being the director of the OWCN. So I have been involved with OWCN for most of my professional life. And it's been extremely rewarding. As of July 1st this year, I actually was fortunate and humbled enough to be given the opportunity to take on the role as executive director of the One Health Institute, so the program that actually oversees and manages the OWCN for the school. Because of that, because of the increase in administrative responsibilities for all the different programs, projects, and centers that exist within the OHI, it does mean I'm going to be having to shift my roles within the OWCN as well. So this is our current structure as of today. I'm currently 80% OWCN because 20% of my time is for national and international work related to oil spill response. We do have two deputy directors, Kurt and Kira, and then the readiness coordinator, Deneen, with people working under that. Where we're going to starting tomorrow is actually shifting the structure of the OWCN a bit. So what we're going to be doing is pulling the readiness elements within the care and the field ops streams. What that's going to do is it's going to allow us to actually have a greater ability for the readiness stream to work directly within care and field. The readiness stream has done an excellent job over the past years, really helping to project manage and organize everything that we do. But by doing this, what it should do is to allow us to have some more day-to-day readiness operational activities within those streams. What it also means is that I'm going to have to move down to a 50% time position for the next year, and it's likely that percent will continue to decrease. So we will be hiring an associate director of the OWCN in the coming months. We also, unfortunately, are going to be losing Kirk Klumpner. He is going to be taking a well-deserved retirement in the coming months. So we will be having two positions that will be opening up fairly soon. If you are interested in joining our team, please keep an eye out for that. We will be doing blogs, social media, etc., as far as those positions opening up. But what that does mean is there will be some opportunities in a leadership role within OWCN in the coming months and some shifts in the structure. So last, because I only have 5 minutes and I've already taken 6, I want to thank everybody within the OWCN. I am not leaving, but I am decreasing the day-to-day operational activities that I'm going to be doing. To be absolutely honest, the only hesitation I had in accepting the OHI executive director role was my true dedication to the OWCN and my love of all of you and the program itself. But I do think there are ways I can help in a broader capacity, both with OWCN as well as outside of that, for the state of California and elsewhere. I also wanted to thank the amazing management team. Everybody's pictures there. It's truly been an honor to be in a leader role for that, and I'm not going away, just shifting my responsibilities. And last, I do want to publicly thank Kurt for all of his work over the past 5+ years for the OWCN directly, and for decades before that in his roles with International Bird Rescue. Again, I don't think he is going too far away as well. I'm sure we'll be hearing his voice within what we do, but it'll be more in an advisory capacity. So thank you all very much. And with that, I'll hand it back to Deneen.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. I'm going to go back to our agenda. Thank you for that presentation, and we wish you tons and tons of success and happiness in your new role. And we know that you will still be with us. So thank you for that. So today we are focusing also on inland response. So I want to invite our first speaker on inland response is Greg McGowan, and he's the program manager of response technology for California Department of Fish and Wildlife, OSPR. And he is going to talk to us a little bit about OSPR's side and how they've been focusing on inland. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to you, Greg.
All right, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me okay. And can you see my screen there?
We can.
Excellent. Yeah, so thank you. A couple things in introduction. Just one, congratulations to you, Mike, and to the One Health Institute for snagging some of your time. You know, that's great for them, great for us, and also to thank you for the many years of service and that you put in already in oil wildlife, and certainly, in my opinion, I think the opinion of many, leading California to the world's foremost oil wildlife care network. So thank you for that. And of course to Kurt as well, and Levon, who's already taken off this year. So appreciate that. And one other just personal note, I just watched some of the memorial for John Lewis, I mean, and Bush and Clinton and Obama spoke. It was really quite powerful and inspirational in a kind of difficult time for the nation. So would encourage anybody to maybe think about watching some of that. It was all recorded. But instead for this, we'll be talking about inland response. Just about 15 minutes here to go through kind of what it looks like from our vantage and how we initially respond to inland spills in keeping with today's theme. Some of you might recognize this spill on the cover here. That's the Hall Canyon spill from a few years ago. And it was just announced last week that there was a nearly $2 million settlement for that spill. So that's good. Just a reminder, by statute, OSPR is required to provide the best achievable protection for California's natural resources. We do that through prevention, preparedness, response, and restoration. Today, and I better start my timer here. Today we're going to focus on response. I'll put my timer here as we go through. Where is OSPR? These blues, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. The colored map of California are office locations. The white map with the blue dots are locations of inland spills. And you can see that the blue dots of our offices are fairly well aligned with the density clusters of blue dots on the other map where the spills occur. That's, of course, not by accident. We're pretty well distributed relative to where we have issues. We have about 250 people, 100 scientists, OSPSs. I'll talk about those roles. Our law enforcement, about 40 people, and then about 100 more people in legal, finance, PIO, HR, all those different elements. Inland response, in many ways, it's a lot more complicated than marine response. The ocean is fairly predictable in terms of its behavior, its size, its location, other than tides, whereas rivers in California vary tremendously, as do the potential threats, as you can see from some of these pictures. When we first head out, our first response when we get a phone call or an email or a text or what have you, is to send what we call a field response team, or FRT, probably heard of. The field response team is 3 people. So we have a wildlife officer, that's law enforcement, environmental scientists dealing with the ecology and the environment, and oil spill prevention specialist dealing with what happened. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those. Before I do that, you can see on this slide, we've got the ones in blue. So this shows much of our organization. The ones in blue are how we pull from for the FRT. So we have group from prevention, we have from scientific, and we have from law enforcement. We have a regional structure. The colors here are northern, central, and southern FRT regions. Just kind of give you some sense of scale together. The FRTs respond to about 250 spills a year, physically respond. So that's 4 a week that they're heading out to go deal with. About another nearly 1,000 spills via telephone and consultation with partner agencies and others. So imagine maybe a harbor master calls, said a boater spilled 12 gallons of diesel in the harbor. They've got it boomed and they've got some sorbents on there. You know, we don't send our people out to go to that. It's already taken care of and it's going to be cleaned up before they could get there. And of course, while there is a regional structure, which makes sense for quick response times in a larger spill, it's all hands on deck. Our wildlife officers, their roles and responsibilities, they serve as the state on-scene coordinator and the investigator. An oil spill is a crime, and so they are investigating crime. They have the authority to do so. They serve in the Unified Command in ICS. Early on, they serve a lot of different roles, from PIO to health and safety, management evidence, and that sort of thing. The oil spill prevention specialist, OSPS, they deal with kind of what happened, how much spilled, what's the volume that spilled, how much was recovered, was it recovered as solid, was it recovered as liquid, where was it disposed of, what was the waste profiling, how do we get rid of it, where was it taken, and then importantly, what happened here? Was it a human error, did the pipe break, was it a weld, all that to contribute to prevention of future spills by learning about what happened in every spill that we have, some 1,300 spills a year. So they're very well aligned with our industry partners, understanding the business of oil production, storage, and transportation, as well as ships and shipping and ports, and that sort of thing. So tremendous asset for us here. The environmental scientists, as you would expect, and these are probably the people that most of you from OWCN would overlap with the most, is the ecology side. During a spill, what is in harm's way? What sensitive resources are out there? What do we need to be aware of? How can we manifest the cleanup that operations wants to do in the most environmentally friendly way? And that's often a very difficult balance. So we serve as the environmental unit lead in the planning section. We develop the resources at risk analysis, trying to figure out where we should prioritize response assets and response protection in those early hours. And importantly, we also determine cleanup endpoints. How clean is clean? When are we done? It's an incredibly complicated and broad set of roles that our ESs have to take on. Initially, they serve in a whole bunch of different capacities, one of which is frequently the wildlife branch director, unless we need to deploy a separate party for that. So lots going on for them, and sure appreciate everything they do. And then I was just going to talk for the last 5 minutes or so here kind of about some of the spills and give you just some charts and graphs. So, you know, one footnote, I've got it here with the asterisks. When we're talking gallons there, it's more complicated than you might think. We have a database that's populated from a state database, which is populated from a reporting party. So somebody calls in how much was spilled, that data gets re-entered into a state data. So I'll give you the example here, the Simric 1Y. You know, we're showing 152,000 gallons spilled, inland spills of petroleum to water in 2019, but Simric spilled 440,000 gallons on its own. So that one was initially reported as 10 barrels. So I don't know whether it didn't get updated later. Another complication is it went to a dry wash, and so they have to report whether it went to water or not. So all that suffice it to say, take all gallon numbers with a grain of salt, as we always do in a spill. They're routinely underreported up front, and we learn more later. But what you kind of see is this bar, the lowest bar here, you know, 45, 67, 61. Looks like we're on track for about 40 this year. It's fairly consistent unless we have an outlier year like 2017, 2019, where it doubles or triples the amount of oil spilled in that year from a major event. Fortunately, those don't happen too often, which is good. So that's kind of looking at how much gets spilled inland. So where is it being spilled? The highest volume, 312, is at oil fields. Not particularly surprising. They've got a lot of oil, they move a lot of oil, they have a lot of moving parts. So it's not surprising that that is where that happens the most. The roads are very common. We'll see that in a second. And then the other different sources out there, or locations. So that's where oil is being spilled inland. When we look at what's the source, the most common source of a spill is a vehicle accident. That includes trains, but by far, the most oil spills are caused, inland oil spills are from vehicles. Facilities are oil fields and refineries and things. Pipelines, of course, go across the state. The unknown and other, we often get a call, hey, there's a sheen on the harbor, or there's a sheen on the river, and we don't know what that source is. So it's common not to have full definition of a source, particularly for some of the smaller ones. So as I mentioned before, vehicles are the most common spill source. So not surprisingly, the most common spill sites are roads. Now, all of these, everything I'm showing you today is stats about petroleum spills to water. So it happened on the road, but then it made its way to water. Again, just to highlight some of the challenges in database reporting, we've got road here, we have waterway, and we have road waterway. So people can pick different ways to report the same event. But in any event, what you hopefully have seen from the charts here is that our most common spill source is vehicles on roads, and that happens all over the state. The most volume is at oil fields and that sort of thing. So more frequent spills with lower volume from vehicles, less frequent, substantially less frequent spills at oil fields, but higher volume. And just a few other bits here, just to kind of share. We do a whole bunch of other things as we go through. We have laboratories, our petroleum chemistry laboratory, investigation, water pollution, liaison is a huge role for us, of course, keeping all of our stakeholders and elected officials and everybody informed, communities, what's going on during a spill, managing volunteers, which some of you could get involved with through OWCN, and then the whole suite of supporting team, people in legal, finance, logistics, documentation, procurement, safety, resources, claims. There's lots and lots to do, as you all know. So I think that gives you a very quick 10-minute overview of the inland response, and I'll be around at the end for questions if anyone's interested.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Greg, for that great presentation. Scott, did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, Denise, I just want to chime in with one quick thing. I know we're going to hold some of these questions toward the end, but this one question seemed kind of specific that could maybe be a quick one. Is Richard asked, as far as what category, I'm trying to read what he wrote here, what category are railroads included into road, merchant, business, other? I think he just was a little confused by the categories on one of the graphs. Let me see, Richard, I'm going to let you speak briefly. Could you just quickly maybe clarify that question?
Yeah, you mentioned that railroads were included, but then when we saw the slides of roads and then there's other and merchant, it wasn't clear to me whether those transportation categories such as railroads, how they were broken out, if they were different than trucks or vehicles. For example, if someone wanted to see were there more spills occurring from transportation in trucks along highways versus transportation by trains, would that be obvious from your graphs?
Probably not from the graph here, because you've got, so this vehicle category includes trains, but every spill is reported separately. So as long as it said it was a train, which it would, the database is capable of separating that out. And I'm using sort of top 10s here and things like that. Recognize there's a lot of sort of summary information going on here. In terms of this part with the roads and merchants, so that's where did the spill happen. So a train, for example, could spill onto a road, it could spill into private property, it could spill on an oil field was going through into a lake, a river. So where the spill happens doesn't necessarily reflect what the material spilled from, but here the vehicles includes trains.
Perfect. Thank you, Greg.
Yes, thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. Okay, so keeping on the topic of inland response, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Actually, speakers. They're going to speak on behalf of what the OWCN management team is working on or has been working on for the past few years from a care operations perspective. Our two speakers today will be Dr. Lorraine Barbosa, our facility veterinarian, and Samantha Christie, who is our care ops specialist, and they'll be speaking together. So I'm going to stop share and I'm going to turn it over to you, Lorraine.
All right, so traditionally we responded to mostly marine animals. So we've got our marine birds, our marine mammals, and our sea turtles, and we had some protocols to cover these species. So we have our protocols for birds. We have a couple of protocols we use for the marine mammals. We have a sea turtle specific protocol and also some sea turtle protocols. But now we have this mandate and we are covering inland species as well. And with that comes not only a ton of more individual species, but a huge variety now in what we will respond to. With that comes lots more protocols. So I kind of have been mentioning protocols. There are a couple of different documents we have. We have protocols, there are SOPs, and there are quick guides. And I'm kind of loosely referring to all of them as protocols, but they are pretty different actually. So the protocols are our gold standard. They're usually about 200 to 300 pages long, and they're packed with information on how to care for animals every step of the way during the rehabilitation process. Now, you saw the 5 protocols that we have available at this time. Well, with all these new species comes a huge gap in the protocols. So we have a huge protocol to-do list. In that meantime, well, it takes a long time to write 203 to 300 page protocols. So instead of, starting with one and kind of having the rest of the species not covered in that sense, we decided to go ahead and start with writing some SOPs so that we can kind of more quickly generate these guidelines and have something for all of the different taxa. So the SOPs are kind of like the placeholders for the protocols. They're about 30 to 40 pages in general, and they still have substantial information on everything that you need to care for the animals. They're just not quite as detailed as the full protocols. The other thing we have, or will have soon, are quick guides, and these are a supplemental document. So these are really for anybody who is familiar with the protocol or the SOP in place for a certain species or taxa, and it's just really something to use during an oil spill if you need to jog your memory or kind of use as a check sheet to make sure that you have everything covered. This is just, again, a supplemental document to use in addition to the protocols and SOPs. So like I said, we have protocols, we have some SOPs that are on their way soon, and we have a quick guide that we've developed. So like I mentioned, we have a huge protocol to-do list. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how that to-do list is organized. So we wanted to organize it based on animals that we thought would be most likely to be affected during an oil spill. So we started with amphibians and reptiles, and we do have SOPs under revision for those taxa. We also have a semi-aquatics SOP that is under revision and near completion. So those are your muskrats, your beavers, and your river otters. We have a small mammals document that we started. We started with rodents for the small mammals, and that one is nearly done as well. And after those are completed, we will be moving on to other small mammals, followed by medium and large mammals, and finally terrestrial birds. Now, we did think terrestrial birds would be fairly likely to be oiled, but because we do have our bird protocols, we thought that they would be well covered in the meantime while we try to get SOPs out for these other taxa groups that are not covered at all by any protocol or SOP. So just wanted to also let you know, some of you might be wondering, well, we come from all of these varied organizations and we have protocols and guidelines and SOPs ourselves at our own organization. So why would OWCN be spending all of this time and effort developing these ginormous protocols and SOPs? Well, we do it because it's a great resource for all of us, including you guys. A lot of you do come from very varied places around California, and you guys most of you are experts in at least one or more species, but not all of you might be experts in all of the animals that we would respond to in an inland spill. So these are really a resource for everyone working at a spill, for everybody coming that might not be completely familiar with all of the species that we might get. It gets us together all on the same page as well, so we know what to expect from each other and we can work together more cohesively while we're at a spill. Also, having these protocols allows for consistent data, and that allows for better research. So after any spill, we want to look back and we want to say, hey, what worked? What didn't work? What could we improve on? And if we know exactly what we did, then we really can figure out what we can improve on and follow up from there, and then apply it to the next spill. If we're doing different things for different animals, we really might not be able to figure that out and not be as beneficial for our patients. I also wanted to let you know that when we're developing these protocols, we're reaching out to people not only from OWCN, but we're reaching out to experts, taxa and species experts all throughout California, across the US, and even outside of the US. So we're really trying to make sure that we have the most consistent information, the most current research and information on all of these animals, so that we can really make sure that these protocols are going to provide our patients with the best achievable care. Thanks.
Great. All right, I'm just going to jump right in. We'll talk about equipment and supplies. So if you're at all familiar with the primary care facilities throughout the state of California, you may have noticed that they're located along the coast. And so with this inland expansion, we needed to explore some options for creating additional primary care facilities in case there were a remote inland spill, or just if a spill were to occur in an area that's hours away from the nearest brick and mortar primary care facility. And so we were looking for a solution that would be mobile, that would be quick to deploy, and that would be adaptable to a variety of spill scenarios. And we think we found that solution with our facility trailers. We have 2 of these, and each one is 24 feet long by 8 feet wide. And within these trailers are 3 Western shelter tents, which are the structure that our primary care facilities will be housed in. And then each one also contains portable HVAC systems and diesel generators. And they both carry additional supplies to handle all of the functions that go on during the primary care of these animals. So let's look at one of our trailers. So here we have a basic diagram of facility trailer number 1. Here's a 20-foot round tent. Here's a 19 by 35 foot tent, and another down here. These are our large portable HVAC systems, and then a variety of smaller pieces of equipment. Let's focus in on these racks up here. We have an intake and processing rack, a support rack, and a pre-wash care rack in this trailer. Notice they're on wheels, so they can be rolled on and off of the trailers. And each one of these racks has a number of primary response kits on it, and each contains the supplies needed to do these various functions. Let's look at our intake team 1 kit here. So all of those small supplies that we need are packed away on here, always on the trailer and always ready to go. Let's look at facility trailer number 2. Again, we have the 3 tents. Here's one, here's one, here's one. And on this trailer, we have the supplies for cleaning and conditioning. And we also have a bank of wall cages, which comes in handy for a variety of inland species. And let's take a look at the tent boxes so you know what that looks like. So within each one of these large metal boxes are all of the contents to put up a tent like the one back here. And more information about those tents. They're called Western Shelters, that's the brand. And here's an overhead shot from our last limited deployment drill, which was to the Coast Guard base in Novato. And our goal here was to experiment with the layout of all of the Western shelters that we have in our inventory. And as you can see, it's more than just what fits in our facility trailers. We have quite the inventory of them. We wanted to play around with the layout, but also troubleshoot any problems with assembly and realize if we were missing any pieces. But these are the 20-foot rounds. This is the 19 by 35. And you'll notice a variety of add-ons like vestibule connectors, connector boots that can be attached to trailers. So it gives us the ability to be really flexible. And so we can set up just as many of these as we would need. And so you might find that the kitchen could be this tent, and intake and processing and pre-wash care, or really whatever we need it to be during a spill. We had some fun setting these up, but it is a lot of work. It takes about 1 hour for a team of 4 to 6 people to set up one tent, but it is very sturdy once it's set up. Here's what it would look like with the HVAC inside and lighting. Okay, we talked about some big pieces of equipment, but some smaller supplies are needed for this inland expansion as well. Lorraine already talked about the different species that we might be working with, but there's a variety of non-aquatic species that we could be encountering now. Mammals, both terrestrial and semi-aquatic. Lots of new inland bird species that we weren't necessarily seeing before. And then my personal favorite, which is the herptiles, so reptiles and amphibians. And we'll just jump into that one. We now have a small area of our warehouse that's dedicated to these inland non-avian species. So here we have some of our primary response kits for herptile species that are ready to grab and be deployed for any sort of inland response where we might encounter them. We have specialized herptile enclosures and small mammal enclosures as well. Here's a quick snapshot of our inventory of some of our herptile pieces of equipment. And this is an inventory that we keep online. And so we can quickly do a search to figure out exactly where a piece of equipment is housed, how many we have. And of course, we're meeting new challenges with working with new species. And so for herptiles, one example would be, instead of just providing supportive heat like we would for a bird, we may actually need to provide a temperature gradient, or for some species, even basking opportunities. We're going to be dealing more with humidity than before, because we may have amphibians, which require quite a bit of humidity, or desert species like lizards, who we want to minimize the humidity for. We could be dealing with live food, so mostly invertebrates, which is not something we've dealt with in marine spills. And we could also be adding in UVB, which is necessary for diurnal reptile species that we are housing for over a week in care. And then we're also encountering increased disease risk for certain populations. And an example of that would be the chytrid fungus in frogs. And so that is something that exists in the environment. We want to be very careful about transporting species that can carry that. And so disinfection procedures have become really important to us. And I think that's all the time I have. So I will just leave you with one piece of equipment we will not be packing.
Thank you so much, Sam and Lorraine. That was really great. If you guys have any questions about our equipment or our protocols, please type them into the Q&A, and Sam and Lorraine will be here to answer a little bit later. And with that, I'm going to jump right into the field ops side. Our two speakers to speak on behalf of field operations will be Dr. Dwayne Tom, who is our field veterinarian, and Jennifer Hawkins, who is our field ops specialist. So Dwayne, we're going to let you take it away first, and then Jenny will speak right after.
Hey, thank you for joining us. My name is Dwayne. I'm the field veterinarian for OWCN. Today, I'm going to talk about our inland response. Did that slide advance? Okay, great. So this is a photo from one of our trail cams that we use for inland response. And it kind of demonstrates how difficult and how different it is between inland response as you might be used to with coastal responses. So it's difficult to actually see these animals and know whether they're oiled, because they're not going to be an animal that typically is beaches itself on the shore. So with inland response, the activation is pretty similar in terms of recruiting the people and how we go about getting organized. But when it comes to the animals that we treat, there's many different species. So some of the differences, there's such a diverse amount of species. Not only are there, we're dealing with amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds, but within each of these groups, there's also differences. There's frogs versus toads, there's newts and salamanders. With the reptiles, there may be turtles or tortoises, snakes and lizards. Mammals, they may be small mammals or large mammals, ungulates. They may be as small as mice to as large as, a mountain lion or a bear. With birds, there's a wide variety there too. Songbirds, raptors, our columbiforms, in addition to our water birds. There's also differing diet requirements. Some of them are piscivores. They may be herbivores, omnivores, or carnivores. And there's also a lot of anatomic differences that we need to take into account. Their digestive system, for example, some of them have simple digestive systems, or they may have foregut or hindgut fermenters, which makes a difference in terms of what kind of diet they get, how often we feed them, as well as some of the medications that they might get. And then we also have to worry about things like species interactions. Can we house these conspecific, the same species together? Or do we have to separate them into different enclosures? Do we have to worry about heterospecifics, so different species interactions such as predator-prey interactions? We don't want to be housing prey species in the same close vicinity as we might have our predators. In terms of animal recovery and handling, these animals may be more difficult to find and capture. They can be very active and motile. So they're actually moving, so we're gonna actually have to catch them or trap them. They also may be hiding or difficult to see, and they also may be active at night. And it can also be difficult to discern if some of these species are actually oiled, like our amphibians. There's also the potential for challenging recoveries. We may be hiking over hills, through creeks. We have to avoid sinkholes. We have to worry about cliffs, going through mud flats, as well as things like poison oak and ticks. And there's also some safety concerns for ourselves. Not only do we have to still be cautious about leaks in some of the birds, but we also have some other things like toxins. So, some animals secrete poisonous toxins, like this Sierra newt that secretes a tetrodotoxin, which is like what you see in the pufferfishes. And then some animals also have venomous bites, like this western rattlesnake. We also have to worry about teeth. Some of these animals can inflict a pretty serious bite, and other ones have talons or claws that can also cause a lot of damage to us. As far as stabilization goes, there's a lot of differences there too. Just in the hydration methods, for amphibians, we do a lot of soaking. We're going to do a lot of subcutaneous and maybe IV fluids for mammals and reptiles, as well as for the small birds and mammals, there's a lot of syringe feeding. And then for the larger birds, it's what we're more used to in the coastal events where we do a lot of gavaging. There's a lot of husbandry changes or needs. So enclosures, worrying about water or moisture for the animals. Different kinds of perches. Our prey species may need hideaways. And also temperature requirements. There's a lot of different temperature variations that we need to house these animals in, whether they're amphibians or reptiles, mammals or birds. So what we try to do is we try to be more prepared and help with our readiness by we're developing more species-specific protocols for these inland species, as well as species-specific stabilization kits, animal care supplies. We're incorporating taxa experts and specialists to help us deal with these animals. When there's an actual activation, we get a database of the listed known species in that area, and then we can populate these templates with these species so we know what to expect and we know where these animals are that might help us in recovery and their treatments. So overall, inland response, it's very challenging, but it's also very stimulating and interesting, and it allows us to assist more effective wildlife. And we're also able to gain more experience and appreciation of a wide, diverse number of species that we hadn't been able to deal with before. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny.
Hey, everybody. Dwayne just kind of gave us an overview of the different species that we've been seeing inland in some of these responses. And like you said, there's a lot of nuances that are occurring with this inland mandate. So I'm going to kind of go through the equipment updates we've made in order to address some of those new species and instances that we are seeing with the inland response. While I'm on it, let me change my, there we go. So for vehicles, We've done some updates to the Sprinter, which is our main response vehicle that we can kind of use as a staging area. So we've outfitted it with Wi-Fi capabilities so that we can offload data from the Wildlife Recovery app. And we've also added a screen between the driver and the bed of the vehicle so that when we're taking it anywhere, if anything comes loose, it's not going to come flying up through the front of the vehicle. We also bought a new truck to tow some of our trailers. And we bought a new transit vehicle that's climate controlled so that we have better transport of animals. And then we bought 2 UTVs so that we can use them inland and coastally. For our boats, we bought a Bay Runner 550, which is pictured here, which we often call the Petrel. And then we bought 2 new engines for 2 different boats, the Zodiac boat at MWB CRC and the Jana boat. And we're currently still trying to break the Petrel engine in. So for trailers, we've made some updates to the MASH, including putting a VHF base marine radio in, as well as the cradle point and antenna. And that gives the MASH internet access, which is really beneficial for us so that hopefully eventually we can use OWRM'd in the MASH as well. And then for the FO trailer, so one of our main goals with field ops has been to place equipment throughout the state so that anybody, well, I guess we can increase our response capabilities as far as having earlier access to equipment so that anybody in our responder database could access equipment if it would take the OWCN management team a while to get to some of these locations. Someone else can actually go retrieve that trailer and start recovering wildlife, which would be very beneficial for the response as a whole. And so currently we have 8 trailers stashed throughout the state of California, 2 of which are in Davis. We're having currently in the process of creating an inland and a marine trailer. So there'll be 2 different trailers. And then each of those trailers is stocked with both recovery and hazing equipment. And it has enough gear to start several people off for at least the first few days of a response, which will hopefully allow us to get a jump start on the response as a whole. And so here this map shows the different trailer locations as well as some of our equipment caches that are currently throughout the state of California. As far as gear goes, like Dwayne mentioned earlier, there's a lot of new species that we're encountering with these inland responses, which means we need additional gear in order to help recover and care for those animals. So some of the updates we've made for trapping them are we bought some Sherman traps, which are used primarily for rodents, K-rats, and things of those nature. We also got various sizes of have-a-heart mammal traps, which we have ranging from small to like coyote or mountain lion size, and then also turtle traps for some of these inland pond and lake areas or rivers that we are encountering. We also have a variety of nets. We bought recently some Tomahawk collapsible nets, which we found are really useful. We also have increased our animal handling glove and animal control pole supplies, as well as raptor supplies. And as Sam was mentioning, we have recently increased our equipment for amphibians and reptiles because we haven't historically responded to those as much. So we've got snake tongs and reptile and amphibian carriers. Some other updates we've made. So we purchased spot devices, which for people who don't know what those are, essentially they help us in any area that doesn't have cell service or has limited cell service. So if we're sending field teams out and they get in trouble or somebody gets hurt or they need assistance, they can use those spot devices to contact emergency services so that we can get somebody out there to help them wherever they are. And we've purchased transport and holding crates with guillotine doors for some larger mammals. And then we've also made and currently are finally testing the final updates we've made to the Wildlife Recovery app, which we're very excited about. And then we've added 2 different ACTs. So we have 3 total. We have the green ones, which I think most people are familiar with that we use for most species. And then we made NOAA species marine mammal ACTs, which are orange, and sea otter, which are yellow. And we've printed QR codes and attached them to those ACTs. And the QR codes is what ties those animals to the Wildlife Recovery app and OWCN. And then we also recently created and had printed high visibility safety vests for our field response teams. For our hazing equipment, with the inland response, we've had to update our inventory to include things like predator eyes and fox lights and AM/FM radios. And we're also working with the Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering Department at UCDAVIS to try to come up with some other hazing equipment that might be utilized in an inland response. We've also revamped our pyrotechnics cache, as well as we're in the process of trying to develop a pyrotechnic specific training program with the UCDAVIS Police Department. And we've also updated our laser safety gear and trainings. So we bought safety glasses for the lasers that we have, and our staff has also been trained through the University Laser Safety Program. So the best test of obviously all of this equipment is to actually test it in a legitimate response. So we can be prepared as possible, but that really doesn't mean much unless we test it out in a field setting. And so the responses that we've been to lately have really highlighted our training equipment and protocol gaps, which is really beneficial for us because it allows us to continue to improve and update those things in order for us to be the best that we can be. So yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Jenny. And thank you to all of our speakers on inland response. As you can see, we've been doing a lot, have a lot of new fun things to test out, some of which we've already put to the test. So the next thing we're gonna do is I am gonna speak to you guys about, just briefly, about our upcoming virtual drill. So just to give you guys a little bit of background on our upcoming virtual drill, we wanted to share this information with you today. As you know, the OWCN management team generally plans a full deployment drill every year, which some of you may have already been involved with over the past years. But given the current COVID-19 situation, we have decided that this year we will host our first virtual drill. This drill is going to take place on August 26th. We are going to host it on Zoom, and we will be utilizing the breakout room and some of the other Zoom features. And the part that we really wanted to share with you is that if you would like to join us as an observer, we are going to open up pre-registration probably sometime around next week. So you will get some communication from us about observer opportunities. The thing that's really important is that in order to be an observer, you will need to pre-register, and all of this information will be sent out via an email to you. So you will get everything you need and all the instructions on what we need you to do to be an observer. Quick note about the format. It is going to be scenario based, but we are going to utilize a more tabletop format, and we're going to be doing a lot of discussion. So you'll get to sit in as an observer and really observe some of the discussions that happen. So with that, I am going to stop screen sharing because we are getting short on time. And thank all of you for joining us today, and thank all of our speakers. And what I'd like to do is open it up for the Q&A session. I recognize some people may have to sign off at 1 o'clock, but we can kind of stay on and do a little bit of a Q&A if everybody's open to that. And again, we want to thank you all for being here and joining us today. And also a big thank you to all of our speakers. We really appreciate you sharing everything about inland response with us, and Mike sharing about the changes that are coming up in OWCN. So thank you all, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott, and please join us if you'd like to participate in the Q&A.
All right, y'all. Yes, thank you, Janine. Thank you, everyone, for great presentations. And yes, we only have a couple minutes till our 1 o'clock. We'll try to go a few minutes over if people are able to stick on, and if not, no worries. Just sign off at leisure here. So first question, Azul had a good question. Asking about, will there be new training for volunteers to work with the new species we'll be encountering? And would we also work with the already existing wildlife rescue groups now found throughout California? So the short answer to that is yes, that is exactly it. You kind of answered it right there. Our hope is that, you know, our best responder for OWCN for our mandate is to have a cross-trained responder that can do more than, you know, ideally do more than one taxa. We know a lot of people have a specialty or a focus, which is great. Just like I think about coming from the Marine Mammal Center, you know, I was more familiar with marine mammals, need to learn a lot about seabirds. Well, now it's with the inland response, it's even greater than that. We don't expect someone to necessarily know everything about all the taxa in California. It's tough, but it's great to get cross-trained. If you can volunteer at more than one organization, that's phenomenal. If not, then at least you can potentially do some training programs or cross-training with other member organizations, or you can take some of our trainings. When you'll see during our trainings that we try to promote that kind of shared learning. So again, our network has this great expertise amongst all the different 45 member orgs, and sometimes our training program provides that opportunity to gather you guys together and you can learn a little bit from one another. And again, the last statement I'll say on that is, it's not necessarily that you're going to become an expert, so you'll be able to go out there and grab that raptor if you've never dealt with birds before, but it does mean that you may be able to support those, because we have a lot of experts in the network that we can pull from, and so we can have a lead expert and then we can have some support staff. So that's kind of the thought process for a lot of the different taxa out there. I have an anonymous attendee saying that Janine looks like she has a halo behind her head, so I had to mention that really quick. I have a question from Debbie McGuire here. So I'm going to pose this to the panel. Let one of you guys probably jump on this. Is that Debbie mentioned that they've seen some sick raccoons that test negative for parvo, et cetera, and they discussed if it might be COVID. Is there any test for it? Any of our veterinarians want to chime in on that?
I'll just say, I don't know if there's a specific, like a species specific test, but I would reach out to your public health department and contact them, because they'd be able to have the most up-to-date information on what type of testing would be available.
Perfect. Anyone else? I think that was good. All right. And then a follow-up question from Debbie was, what are our concerns with the RHDV2? I believe is rabbits involved.
I'll say that. So that's the rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus, and they did recently find a case of that in California, I think a couple of months ago. I think that might have been the first case in California, and it's a severe disease in rabbits that can be transmitted between rabbits. So definitely keeping your rabbits in care individually in individual enclosures will help to decrease spread of that. If you see clinical signs that are consistent with the disease, I would definitely reach out to CDFW and notify them, because they would be able to have instructions on what to do and how to potentially test for that. But yeah, definitely keeping your rabbits individually caged will help. It's a pretty severe disease, so it is likely that most individuals would probably die before being admitted to rehab, but if you see anything, I would contact CDFW if you have concerns.
And actually, the Wildlife Investigations Lab just did send out an information sheet to all rehab permit holders regarding the hemorrhagic disease as well. So if you didn't receive that, it probably is available on the Wildlife Investigations Lab website, which is where Nicole Carrion was based before her retirement recently. But that is the program that's kind of heading up the diagnostics and the information going out.
All right, perfect. Okay, and I think we've got a couple. We've got one question. I think Mia, Janine's going to respond to you directly, asking about some OSPR involvement for the drill. And I've got one on here. Let's use this as the last one here, since we're a few minutes over now. Richard wrote, how are you going to deal with inland species such as raccoons? And do volunteers have to have rabies vaccination before being called or participating with those? And for cleaning and husbandry, same question. I think I'll start it out, and maybe I can have the panelists back me up here. But in general, yes, we are looking at, depending on the species and depending on that vector species and the risk at which they may transmit certain zoonotic diseases, we are thinking about that. And so raccoons aren't the best example in this state, but definitely for an even better example would be bats. And so if we were responding to bats, for example, we may really want to consider rabies vaccination, and we may absolutely require it. So I can't say that we've had a ton of experience in large spills with bats yet, knock on wood. But that is the concept, is that in the database, so everyone listening, you can upload a rabies vaccination if you have it. And we actually have that tracked. And so it is something that we would look at if we're looking for personnel and we're working with high probability of rabies in the vector species, then we're going to go ahead and select people with rabies vaccinations to be the first hands touching these animals. So that is something that we definitely consider, and we'll consider to do for different species and different zoonotic diseases. So definitely something that factors into our personnel decisions. Anyone else want to chime in on that? All right, I think we're good. And the last thing, just a follow-up question. I see Azul just wrote, where do you go for that rabies vaccination? That's the one tough thing. I know people have asked us, do we pay for rabies vaccinations, et cetera? We are not able to do so at this time. And most member organizations aren't either. And so it usually is the responsibility of the individual, so the responder, contact your medical provider and investigate your options for receiving a rabies vaccination. It is usually a 3-part series where you get some shots. It can be expensive. It sometimes is covered partially by insurance, sometimes not. It's very individualized, so I can't speak to exactly everyone's individual situation, but definitely you should investigate it if you're interested and expect to work with species that may carry rabies. All right, Deneen, I think we're good for the closing. No more questions.
Okay, well, only 5 minutes over, and we had a lot of information today. So again, thank you to all of you for joining us. Thank you to all of our speakers, and we will see you at some of our other virtual events we have coming up. So you'll hear more about the virtual drill coming up in August, and then in September we have our planning summit, which so some of our other virtual events that'll be coming up. Other than that, again, a big thank you and enjoy your day, and we will see you soon.
Thanks all.